He's toured South Africa months after the end of apartheid. He's crossed the orange and green battle lines in Ireland. And he was on this plane, just hours before it was bombed by the Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka. Emile Bruneau is an accidental conflict tourist. A few years ago, Emile volunteered at a camp to bring together Protestant and Catholic children in Northern Ireland.
They did mural projects, they played games, kind of typical activities that you see in conflict resolution programs.
For some of the children, it seemed to work. They came away with new friendships and mutual understanding. But for others, the program ended in disaster.
A fight broke out between two of them, and it immediately split the group down partisan lines, and they ended up with a 50-child brawl.
Two questions haunted Emile as he returned home and finished his PhD in basic neurobiology. What was wrong with conflict resolution? And could he help fix it? He wrote to MIT neuroscientist Rebecca Saxe, who hired him to see if neuroscience could help people overcome their long-standing hostilities.
If you want to know how people change their minds, well, the answer is going to be in how they change their brains.
Rebecca Saxe's lab studies that brain-mind connection.
Huge chunks of the human brain are devoted to thinking about other people, and in particular, to thinking about things about other people you can't see from the outside, right? Their goals, their motivations, their thoughts, their desires, their emotions.
Emile's already found specific regions of the brain that light up when we feel empathy for other people's suffering. And there's a twist. People in conflict are not as sympathetic towards the suffering of their adversaries. So if we're going to heal old wounds, the first step is to bring empathy back online.
Most conflict resolution programs treat both sides equally. And you can understand the reasoning behind that. You don't want to show favoritism. But if the psychological biases they each come in with are very different, then if you treat them both equally, you might be favoring one group. You might be addressing the psychological biases of one group, but not addressing the needs of the other group.
Social psychologists know that people treat each other differently depending on how much or how little power they have. People with more power tend to be less sensitive to others' suffering.
Asking groups to come together and leave their histories behind and work on common goals as individuals tends to work better for the dominant group.
Hoping to better help disempowered groups, Emile tried a new type of intervention with white Americans and Mexican immigrants in Arizona near the Mexican border. Emile's theory was that the disempowered groups didn't need to understand the group in power so much as they needed to be understood themselves. Participants took on one of two roles. The speaker wrote a brief essay about the challenges confronting their ethnic group. The listener was asked to summarize in their own language what the speaker had said, sending the translation back so that the speaker could see how well he'd been understood. Surveys before and after the test showed that people from disempowered groups, like the Mexican immigrants, feel more favorable towards their antagonists after they've been given a chance to be heard. People from the dominant group, white Americans for instance, showed the most improvement after they've been compelled to listen. It seemed to work, but just because people say they feel more empathetic towards their enemies doesn't mean that they'll actually treat each other more kindly.
One thing that psychology has taught us is that we often don't know our own minds.
There's lots of motivations that we have to say, no, everyone's my brother, I love everyone, I feel bad for everybody's suffering. Well, maybe something we could measure about your brain would be a better, more honest predictor of your future behavior.
By looking at associated with feelings of empathy, the team hopes to measure how much groups in conflict really do alter their attitudes.
One of the strengths of neuroimaging is you can get a quantitative measure of brain activity in these different regions. And that's kind of what we're relying upon. Now that we know where the regions are, we can actually do it quite well.
With this research, they'll have a way to probe just how well conflict resolution efforts are working, and to test out new ideas as well. In spite of their best efforts, programs like Emile's camp in Ireland are mostly flying blind. If Emile is successful, they'll have a new tool to evaluate their interventions and ensure that they're actually helping people.